Welcome to the Odds Breakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 12 of 2020. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can follow me on Twitter at OBKiev. Follow us at the Odds Breakers and follow us on all social media / the Odds Breakers. This episode is being brought to you by uwager.lv for a 50% sign up bonus. Please visit uwager, use the promo code OddsBreakers. Terms and conditions apply. If you'd like to help us out with our costs, sponsor the podcast and the website, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, become a member. For $17.99 a month, you can get my plays and premium plays before the line moves, as well as access to some pages on the website. For $2 more, you can become a patron subscriber, get all that, and the podcast a little bit early. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. My friends, we have a great show for you today. Mr. Greg Peterson from Hoopin with Hoops in VSiN is coming on to talk a little bit about some of these early conference tournaments. It's fantastic. This man works very hard. Can't wait to talk to him. We had the weekend actually didn't start out that well as far as the handicap, and it got better later as we went. We ended up going 5-7-1. But the last place, Stanford, was actually a 4-star play at -1, so that worked out really well to get it pretty close back to even for the weekend. So I'll take that, especially when we started pretty much 0-3-1, so that was pretty brutal. Counting some of the bubble teams didn't come through that I thought would. NC State in the home run spot struggled against Pittsburgh, so that didn't help. Florida they were down by 20 points in the first half against Tennessee. You know that they're barely holding on for dear life to get into the tournament. So a couple of those plays didn't work out well. Kentucky, can't believe that thing got stuck at 139. That thing was trending over the whole game. Pretty much lights out the last couple minutes of the game. Nobody scored much at all. So Auburn really fizzled out there. But either way, was happy to hit Stanford. Very big play on Sunday to, get pretty close back to even. So no complaints here. Was a great weekend of college basketball. Some pretty big upsets, too. I mean, Duke, they just beat NC State. It's Monday night right now when we're recording. But, Duke didn't have the greatest weekend. Ended up losing to Virginia. We were actually on Virginia for a premium play as well as a moneyline sprinkle. And Virginia won outright, 52-50 in Virginia fashion. So was glad I was able to make that a play. Ended up getting it at +4. So Duke definitely got theirs against NC State tonight. They won by 15 points. So they'll be fine. Baylor actually had a little bit of trouble themselves. Baylor lost at TCU. So, TCU somehow woke up at the end here. They beat West Virginia. Then they lose to Iowa State, but then they beat Baylor. So that was interesting. West Virginia's actually lost 6 of their last 7 games. I think they're almost falling down to the bubble here if this keeps up. They're in. They could probably even lose out, but they're definitely giving up some ground here. They're probably now a 4 or 5 seed, instead of a 1-2 seed here. So West Virginia definitely messed up, but we'll see if they can get it right here when they go to Iowa State on Thursday. Wanted to quick talk about some of the teams on Kenpom that are overrated and some that are underrated here. Michigan State sitting at 7. They took care of business against Maryland. That was I was more on Maryland for a small play, but I like the under bigger, and that didn't come to fruition either. Michigan State was hitting pretty much everything against Maryland. They played fantastic. As a matter of fact, the Michigan State kind of switched with Michigan. Michigan is dropped a few games in a row. Dropped against Wisconsin last Thursday, and they dropped one against Ohio State on Sunday. Right now, instead of Michigan, it's Michigan State that's
so hot right now.
In the Big Ten, it is also Wisconsin that won their last 6 games in a row. That is
so hot right now.
Ohio State won 5 of their last 6 games.
So hot right now.
And looking at another conference, UCLA's been on an absolute tear. A couple weeks ago, they didn't have any chance at all to get into the tournament, and now they're pretty much in. I have them as in right now, past the bubble, so pretty crazy how well they've actually been playing the last few games. UCLA on Kenpom is still really high. I mean, they're ranked 80th, but they're 19-7. They have they don't have any great non-conference wins. They lost to Michigan State. That was kind of their chance. They lost to Notre Dame and North Carolina. But, being 12-5 in the Pac-12 right now, I think that might just be enough to get in. So congrats to UCLA. I wonder if there'll be a dark horse when it comes to the Pac-12 tournament.
You're ridiculously good looking.
But, some other teams, I still think Baylor's going to be a number 1 seed. I believe they're still there. According to Joe Lunardi of ESPN, they are still there. Baylor probably can't have another hiccup. They have to. They pretty much have to win out. San Diego State, I think if they make it to their championship game, they'll still be a number 1 seed. Probably the worst 1 seed going to the East, is what I'm guessing, because you don't have any teams in the East from the ACC now that Duke has too many losses. Dayton, I think, in my opinion, is a top 4 team. I would drop San Diego State out if it was up to me. I think they're definitely overrated. Louisville's at number 9 right now. I think that's about where they should be. Maryland's at 10. That's about where they should be. BYU at 11. I don't even know what to think of this team. They've been awesome lately. And now that Childs is playing and they're pretty healthy, they're on the up and up here. And, it's hard to tell because they're just like Gonzaga playing that West Coast Conference. We don't know what the real ceiling is. And Houston at number 12 is kind of the same deal. They lost 2 of the last 4 games. I wouldn't have Houston at number 12. I would probably have them, in the top 20, but not in the top 12. Some underrated teams, I think, is Iowa at number 21. I think Iowa's just been playing amazing lately. They've also been very hot. Well, they did lose against Michigan State, but they just beat Penn State. So good for Iowa there. And they won the 2 games before that. I think that Kentucky is the biggest one, sitting at number 26. Kentucky, in my opinion, is a 2 seed. It's just that the metrics doesn't like Kentucky because they don't shoot a lot of threes and they don't hit a high 3-point percentage. As a matter of fact, their effective field goal percentage only ranks 131, but they get it done. They've won 8 in a row now, and before that Auburn lost, they won the 4 games before that. They're just pretty much ruling through the NFC or the SEC, and Tennessee is up next for them, and then they have to go to Florida, which Florida needs very bad to remain relevant and in the discussion for the NCAA tournament. I actually personally wouldn't mind seeing some smaller teams get in at large in case that they don't win their conference tournaments, like Furman or something, or maybe even Greensboro. East Tennessee State, maybe Rhode Island, someone like that, Richmond. I'd like to see those teams get in case they don't win their conference tournament for sure. Don't really care about the middle of the road teams in the SEC or any of the other conferences, really. I know the Big Ten deserves to have more teams get in because they've been so good this year. They've done really well in their non-conference games, but there's some smaller teams that I think could make some serious noise and make the NCAA tournament very interesting. Wanted to talk a little bit about the Combine. All right, the NFL Combine was pretty cool. There's this 5.140 ran by an offensive lineman, and I'm looking for his name right now. Mekhi Benton from Louisville. Becton, actually, sorry. Through 6'7", 365 pounds and ran a 5.140. I thought that was pretty amazing for a man that size. 5.11 seconds. So that's pretty much the same speed as what Jake Fromm ran, who weighs about 145 pounds less. So that's just amazing right there. Got to give it up to my boy Jonathan Taylor. He, 4.3940, fantastic. He's about a 230-pound running back. So, for a running back that size, he's that bigger size running back running that fast. Just kind of goes to show you why he should be the number one pick overall. So I'm really happy about that. The Ruggs from Alabama, wide receiver, ran the fastest 40 at 4.27. It's not the fastest 40 in history, but that was definitely very fast. I think Ross III's 40 might have been a little bit faster. And he came in at 4.22 seconds. So, but either way, Ruggs is taller and probably going to be a very good wide receiver in the NFL. But can never tell because there's been a lot of wide receiver busts drafted early. So I'm not a huge fan of taking shots at drafting wide receivers, especially when they played for such a great team. I mean, he had a great quarterback as well named Tua, so as we all know. Either way, this is going to be an awesome NFL draft. I'm real excited to see where some of these players end up dropping to. So the Big Ten rankings has been adjusted now that Michigan State went to Maryland and beat them. Michigan State is now back to being the number one team in the Big Ten. Penn State dropped the game against Iowa, as you know, so Michigan State hopped them in my rankings. I have Maryland second. Maryland's still deserving of the second right now. Penn State third. Illinois fourth. I'm still a little higher on Illinois than most other people. I just think that DeSumo was being back is big for them. And then I have Iowa fifth. Ohio State sixth. Wisconsin seventh, and Michigan eighth. And I have Minnesota 9. And I got to tell you, Minnesota has really dropped. They are not even 500. They are 13-15. So for Minnesota, they better start winning because the ceiling is the roof, and that roof just might be the NIT tournament because right now they're on their outside looking in here with so many losses. Kenpom says that they're an NCAA tournament team, but the AP sure is not going to say that, especially when they're not even close to 500 in the Big Ten. As a matter of fact, Minnesota is 7-11 in the Big Ten. They can't even get to 500. They need to win out to even have a chance and probably win at least 2 games in the Big Ten tournament coming up. So Minnesota better get together here. Next, I have Purdue. Purdue is also on the outside looking in. Need some big things to happen, as well as Indiana. Indiana had a little bit of a run, but then they just dropped 2 games in a row. And then, of course, Nebraska and then Northwestern. And Northwestern did just go to Nebraska and beat them. So I just think that Nebraska has a little bit more upside than Northwestern, but both of those teams obviously will not be playing in any tournaments coming up.
But to be the man, you gotta beat the man, and I'm saying, woo, right here.
All right, well, that covers our rankings. I also wanted to tell you that we are doing our NCAA tournament challenge again, where you have an opportunity to join and win $250 for first place, $150 for second, and $50 for third. Make sure you check out the website, theoddsbreakers.com, and click on the link. Just type in NCAA Tournament Challenge in the search bar. If you can't see it, it will be listed in the featured area right up top where you can join for absolute free. So make sure you do that. What we ask in return is you give us a 5-star review on your Google Play or iTunes or wherever podcast platform that you listen to. Or please just happen to share an episode on Twitter or your social media platforms. Without further ado, let's bring on Mr. Greg Peterson from VSiN and Hoopin with Hoops. All right, now I'm very excited to bring on a man who eats, sleeps, and breathes college basketball and the sports betting aspects of it. He loves the game so much that people call him Hoops. I'm very excited to welcome a former Wisconsin resident such as myself and current host of Hoopin' with Hoops, and you've heard him on the VSiN radio network, Mr. Greg Peterson. You can follow him on Twitter at @GUnit_81. Greg, you handicap every game in college basketball, my man. How do you find the time to do it?
It's one of these things where when you work in this industry, you really just have to take it all in. It's a labor of love, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but I absolutely love what I do, and it is one of these things where when you just love everything that you do, it doesn't really feel like work.
This has to be, you have to be putting at least 12-hour days in for some of the stuff that I see that you
12
do.
12 hours is a light day for me.
12 hours.
Right now, as we're doing this, I'm on like hour 15.
Oh my goodness, my man. I don't even know how much sleep you get, but you do such a great job. I've been really enjoying your podcast there, Hoopin' with Hoops. So you listeners out there, make sure you check it out if you haven't, because Greg talks about every game. And Greg, even some of the games that you talk about, I might not have a play that game, but I remember some of the tidbits that you talk about that team, and then I apply it to to some of my future handicaps. So just because you're not necessarily playing the game that Greg might be talking about, it really sticks in your head. So I want to thank you for that, my man. You did such a great job. Yeah, really appreciate that. So and I know that you don't do a ton of futures, right? You kind of go from your style is more like just by the game, but you'll definitely be watching these conference tournaments and betting on the individual games themselves, correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just one of these things where it's all individual games. In my opinion, every game is its own living, breathing entity, and I think that everything should be taken as such, because with so many people, they have like their power rankings and everything like that. And I certainly have mine, but adjustments have to be made based on who is being played in what venue, what time, and all these things are so different, and you need to take every game with its own care, because not every situation is the same.
That's right. And it's not. It's a lot of it goes by matchups. A lot of it goes by location and just what's the team trending? Are they a better home team? Are they a better away team? That applies somewhat to neutral courts. So that's real exciting. And it's conference tournament time, and March Madness must be your favorite time of year, because it is mine, Greg. And
honestly, I prefer January and February more, because with March, it means that everything's coming to an end.
Oh, I know, it's sad. It's very sad, but when you're having a great year like yourself, and it's nice to be able to kind of breathe a little bit, I'm sure. But then it's kind of like when you love something and then it's gone, you miss it, right? So I see that bittersweetness to your sentiment right there. So can definitely appreciate that, my man. But you do some baseball too, don't you, in the off season, and the basketball off season, and there's some other distractions that keep you busy, right?
Oh, absolutely. I do baseball after college basketball season. I do the same thing as I do for the college basketball season, every side, every total, every day, do my podcast. So there is no rest for me, to say the least.
No rest for the wicked, my man. Well, so out of all the bubble teams, which one is the most dangerous? Or you can throw out a couple. I have a couple in mind myself. Who's if I'm like a 2 seed or in a bracket or 3 or 4 seed, who do I not want to face out of the bubble teams?
For a 2 seed?
You can say a 2 seed. You can get whatever you think. Some of the top 30, top 35 teams. There's a couple I have in mind that if they get in, they could be very dangerous to anybody, really. So, who are some of the ones that you think are possibly underrated?
I think that Oklahoma is a team that's really starting to ascend. This is a team that ranks in the top 10 in the country with regards to fewest fouls committed per possession, and they also do a great job of not turning the ball over. You've got a lot of versatility as well. Brady Mann and Christian Doolittle, these guys have size. They're able to launch from 3. So I like what they're able to bring to the table with that regard. So I do think that this is a team that could have a little bit of a danger factor to them. We saw them over the weekend go on the road, knock off West Virginia. I think they should be able to make the NCAA tournament, and while they're there, they should be able to make some noise as well. So that's a team that I certainly don't want to face off against. And then they are probably going to need to win their conference tournament, but Wright State out there in the Horizon, like you've got a guy in Loudon Love making some noise, 16 points, 10 rebounds. Bill Wampler shoots 40% from 3. Cole Gentry is a very solid player as well. They've gotten to at least 70 points in all but one of their games so far this year. So those are a couple teams I look at that if they wind up making the NCAA tournament, I think that they're certainly going to be a force.
Oh, that's definitely a good call. Hopefully Wright State does take care of business and win their tournament because, that would be something. They would probably need that to get in. So great call on Oklahoma there. I was thinking about a team that actually beat Oklahoma this year but went on a really terrible run because they had some bad injury luck. And I was on them big on Sunday, and that's Stanford. And the thing about them, they only had that one win in the non-conference against Oklahoma. The rest of them are pretty, cake, I guess you'd call them. A lot of bad teams that they played in the non-conference. But the fact that they're heating up right now, their effective field goal percentage is ranking 21 on Kenpom. I'd call them a bubble team, and I think they're almost in, but they shoot a really high field goal percentage, around 48%. So I think that'd be a team I'd be a little bit scared of seeing in the tournament. Do you think Stanford's going to make it in?
I think that Stanford should be able to make it in. This is a bunch that is now really rallying after they had a little bit of a tough stretch out there in the Pac-12. The big thing with Stanford, though, what are you going to be able to get from game to game? Because it feels like the offense is very all or nothing. So this is a team that, in my opinion, very boom or bust when you just take a look at what they're doing in general out there in the Pac-12. And it just feels like that's the way in the Pac-12 in general. I mean, we right now have UCLA atop the Pac-12 standings. Who saw that coming from this conference? They've just all been beating up on each other, much like the Big Ten.
Yes, much like the Big Ten. Good comparison there, and I guess you can call a bubble Big Ten team pretty dangerous too, because there's not a huge difference between the Rutgers, the Minnesotas, and the Indianas, compared to the the Penn States and the Iowas. It isn't a huge distance and points and power rating, in my opinion. So I get, and I don't think Minnesota can make it now, but that was a team. It's funny, you see them on Kenpom ranking, I think 31, and then they have that weird record just sitting there, 13-15. You have Colorado 21-9. You have Illinois 20-9. Then all of a sudden, this 13-15 team is ranked 31, and then Rutgers 18-11. I think if they have any chance of making it, they could definitely disrupt some stuff. But any one of those Big Ten teams, I think, could be a bracket buster too. So definitely be looking out for that. And my Wisconsin Badgers, I got to tell you, I focus on the Big Ten, Greg, and it's been a fun conference to watch this year, hasn't it?
Oh, it certainly has been. It's been an interesting one. And out there in the Big Ten, as we know, the home teams have just been coming through like wildfire It is absolutely insane what they've been able to do. I think they're winning straight up at about a clip of 80%. They've certainly been covering much more often than not so. And it's just one of these things where these conferences, they all have their funky trends, like everything in the SEC is going over. Big Ten, all about home teams. I mean, the list goes on and on. In the Pac-12, just throw a dart out there, and that's a team that's going to wind up winning because you just don't know what you're going to get from that conference. But it's been a lot of fun.
Oh, man, it really has. And I think there's just, besides Kansas, those other teams, it's going to be really fun to fill out a bracket this year, but it's also going to be really frustrating because you're going to be probably scratching some stuff out a little bit here and there and trying to rethink it because there's nothing that really sticks out here. But that's what makes it awesome. That's what makes it great for me because I like competition, and it's not in football where there's just the Alabamas and Clemsons out there. There's literally a chance for 30 teams to make the Final Four, in my opinion, this year. I think it's great. So super excited for the tournament time. I know you're a busy man, so I just want to touch on a couple of these conference tournaments, if that's cool. And we don't have to, there's really not a lot of odds out on them yet. There's a few on 5 dimes. I know a few of the places in Vegas have released some of the futures, but we can touch on it and just say if there's anybody that we could look at as a dark horse to win it all. Obviously, everything's price dependent for me. I do play a couple futures, but let's start with the American East here. And I know that they do. Most of them have one more game, but this one starts on Saturday. For me, it's Vermont or nothing, really. I kind of looked at it, and I can't make a case for any other team. Is there any tidbits you can share about that?
With Vermont, this is a bunch that they're just so interesting because Anthony Lamb, in my opinion, is the best player out there in the conference. This is a guy that's going to be able to give you 17 points. List goes on and on, but their main competition in Stony Brook, they've been without their top player, Elijah Ulani. This is the guy that's been able to pour in their 18 points, shoots very well from 3 ever since then. Stony Brook, I think, has gotten past 65 points once in their games without him. So you're certainly seeing a little bit of a changing of the tide with that regard out there in the America East. I just can't look at any team other than Vermont at this point just because of that injury. And then you've got a bunch of teams that, well, they just stink in Maine and company. I will say if you're maybe looking for a very long shot, Hartford, they've got a point guard in Tracy Carter. He began his career at Marquette. He's been doing a good job. He and Hunter Ellison have been doing a very good job for this team. But with that said, got to be taking a look at Vermont, who's like a 16-point favorite in their first round game against a Albany team that actually isn't terrible.
Yeah. Albany ranked 280 in Kenpom. So most of these guys are kind of up in the high 200s, except for Vermont. But the unfortunate thing that happened to Olani, like you said over there. So hopefully Stony Brook can make a showing here. But Vermont, I would say anything even at minus 200 or better could even be worth it to take a shot at them because I don't see anything happening either there. Let's move on to the next one, the Atlantic Sun here. And a lot of people are going to be on Liberty in this one, but North Florida, they could be dangerous, especially if they can get hot. They seem to shoot pretty well over there. And, obviously everything's price dependent, but I did see a little bit of odds for this, and I believe they're at about the plus 350 or plus 400, while Liberty is, not far from even money to win this thing. So for me, if I was going to bet this thing, I would have to take a look at North Florida. What are your thoughts about this one?
The Osprey have been actually the best cover team out there in all of college basketball, but I think that in the end, Liberty, a team that not just went to the NCAA tournament, but won a game in the NCAA tournament, has to be the play here. I do think that this is an offense that is making some great adjustments. They got pounded by Lipscomb over the weekend, but this is a Liberty team that they've gotten to 70-plus points, and I believe now 5 out of their last 7 games. If they could get Georgie Pacheco Ortiz going, a guy that shot over 40% from 3 last year, has been shooting only in the mid-30s this year. This is a bunch that should be able to really get things kicked up tempo. And with Liberty, they actually play at the second fewest possessions per game in all of college basketball. The only team that plays at a slower pace, that would actually be Virginia.
Wow. So, yep, they're right down there with Virginia, aren't they? And they can frustrate some teams. So, one thing about Liberty, I don't think they are in unless they win it, because they just have really no non-conference. Now, me and you might put them in because we would want to see them in because we've watched them enough, but that doesn't mean that the committee's going to put them in. So I think that might give them a little bit extra motivation here. So, that's probably why they're priced the way they are. and it sounds to me it's Liberty or nothing for you. So definitely can see that. The Big South here, I looked at this one, and it's got to be between Radford and Winthrop, the top ones. Winthrop, to me, is the more complete team, but I think the super dark horse on this one could be Longwood. I just kind of like how Longwood shoots the three. I think that they do it. They actually they shoot a ton of them, right? But it's actually out of their total field goals attempted, they rank 7th on their 3-point shot. But that's the thing that they can kind of do well. But they they're on a little run here, right? They won 4 in a row. So I'm just saying a super dark horse to me could be them. But otherwise, what are your thoughts on this conference?
If I'd be looking at a dark horse, it would actually be the Pirates of Hampton. This is a team that they're able to go off for 90 points on any given night. So I do like that about this group. You've got a guy in Jermaine Merrill that does a great job of being able to fill it up. He's been able to average over 20 points per game, 6 assists, does a nice job of being able to dole that ball out. And then what else you like about this Hampton bunch is the fact that you've got a guy in Benjamin Stanley that's been able to step up for this team. Over 22 points per game, 7.5 rebounds. And I just don't know how Longwood is going to be able to match up with them. With Longwood, you've got Shabuti Phillips, and yes, Longwood's top player is a guy named Shabuti. Not even kidding. And with Longwood, like you mentioned, 4 straight wins. But with that said, I just have a lot of faith in Hampton in this spot. They went on the road. They knocked off Winthrop a few weeks ago. They come into this tournament struggling a little bit, but I think a guy like a Greg Haxel is going to be able to step up. And this is a team with some experience because they wound up playing in the College Insiders tournament last year.
Wow, so Hampton, that's an interesting one right there too. So I'm kind of glad you're thinking that way. Do you think the favorites are a little bit overvalued here?
Probably, but with that said, like you, I'd probably be looking at either Winthrop or Radford, a Radford team that actually wound up knocking off Winthrop, and I think that Winthrop is a little bit overvalued because what I don't like about them is that their free throw shooting percentage in the bottom 35 of the country. That's going to come up big because at some point in this tournament, I do think that they are going to have their backs up against the wall, and they're going to need to hit some free throws to be able to pull it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if they're only up by a few points, teams might see that and start fouling a little bit earlier, right? And that can throw some momentum off for them. And it's definitely a good way to lose the game if you're winning by a few points and can't hit your free throws, my man. All right, well, let's look at the Colonial Athletic real quick. Hofstra is the favorite here, but I think this conference is really anyone's game except for James Madison. I don't know. I didn't get to think about it too much. Maybe looking at Charleston a little bit. What are your thoughts on the Colonial Athletic?
I think that you've got to be taking a look at the Blue Hens of Delaware. This is one of the best teams at being able to win games outright as an underdog. Nate Darling has been a darling for your bankroll all year long, 21.5 points. And midseason, they were able to get in a Villanova transfer by the name of Dylan Painter. That's given this team a double-digit amount of points per game. Justin Mutz down low gives you 8.5 boards per game. I like what he's able to bring to the table. This is a Delaware team that has been able to hang in there with the likes of Villanova and company. So I do think that Delaware is the team that I'd be taking a look at just because with College of Charleston, you've got Grant Riller. He does a great job, but you really don't have too much outside of him. Yeah,
that's true. So they'll be relying on pretty much one guy, for this tournament here. So if someone can shut him down, but I like your pick right there. So we'll see what happens in this one. The Missouri Valley here, Northern Iowa looks the part, but I guess watch out for Loyola. I mean, they got that Porter Moser, and he's got a lot of experience coaching this team. But Indiana State's interesting sitting back there, and I think they might be in anyway. I think they're that bubble team that can get in this conference without winning it out. But does that give some extra less motivation for them and some more to the other teams?
I think that this is going to be one of the biggest crapshoots that we're going to find. It is every single year. The Missouri Valley Conference, ever since Wichita State wound up leaving, has been wide open. You could see Bradley win it. You could see Drake win it. You could see Loyola Chicago, who you mentioned. This is one in which you really got to take it game by game because you've got so many teams with such tight odds, and you've got a conference that really, other than Evansville, who wound up knocking off Kentucky earlier this year and then went winless in conference play. Other than them, I think that this is pretty much anyone's out there. Heck, we even see a couple teams like a Southern Illinois play a little bit better basketball. This is one in which I would say if you're looking to take a shot on someone, just wind up doing a rolling parlay, which what that is you put one unit on the money line for the team that you think is going to win, and you just keep rolling it over. If you don't like the matchup, a player gets hurt or something like that, you can walk away from the table with your winnings, unlike a futures ticket in which you're all in.
Also called a mechanical parlay or like a money line rollover parlay. So fantastic advice there. Yeah, a lot of these actually would be better off doing that. And obviously, you can
payout might actually be bigger on a lot of those too.
Yep. And that's why you do it, because especially if you're going on somebody that be a 3 or 4 seed, you're going to get some plus money towards the end of that. And if you just keep doubling up your money line, that might be better. And at the end, you don't have to worry about the whole thing. You don't have to worry about laying minus 300 to hedge against someone that's tough. You can just bet half and you've already collected your money on that. So that's some great advice right there, Greg. Appreciate that. Mountain West is the one I want to look at next. You have Utah State there, and I think that they need this more. Obviously San Diego State is kind of that one seed that's probably going to be in the East, but I still think they're a one seed if they at least get to the finals game or the championship game here. But Utah State, to me, is not going to be in unless they win this. I think UNLV is very interesting as a host of this tournament. So I was looking at Utah State, but what are your thoughts on this one?
And when you talk about UNLV, there are some places out there in New Jersey in which you're able to find them at 80-1 odds. If you're seeing that, that might be just worth a $5 bill to throw it on, because this is a team that they took down San Diego State. They were, in my opinion, the biggest surprise out there in the conference. And what a lot of people don't know about them is Bryce Hamilton. He has scored at least 15 points in pretty much like 10 out of the team's last 13 games. He's ascended. Elijah Mitru Long was out when UNLV was really having a little bit of a doldrum period in December/early January. He's back in the fold for this team. He's the guy that wound up coming over as a graduate transfer from Texas. TJ Otzelberger has done a great job with this team. If I'm looking at a long shot, it would be UNLV if I'm able to get those like 80-1 odds that you're able to find on the East Coast.
Yeah, that's some great odds. You don't have to put much on that. You can have 2 plays if you did that. You can still play Utah State on the other side and just a little bit on UNLV. That's not a bad idea either. I think that might be the way that I'm going to go and attack this, because when it comes to some of these tournaments, I like to bet on teams that at least have some star power. Sam Merrill right there has just done such a fantastic job for this team, and Kate is very good. I just think that Utah State should be the number one motivated team to try to get back into the tournament. I mean, they do have some experience on this team, so I'm really hoping they can do that here. We're getting some short on time, so I just want to jump into one more conference tournament here, and that's the West Coast Conference. I think I think everybody knows this. There's only 2 teams that can win this. Is it wrong for me to think that BYU can beat Gonzaga and win this, or do you think St. Mary's or, by God, San Francisco has a chance to do anything here?
Hey, St. Mary's wound up playing pretty tough against Gonzaga over the weekend, and we already saw BYU take down this Bulldogs team, so it certainly is not far-fetched. Now, I wouldn't be throwing down money on like Pepperdine or anything like that, but with that said, you've got a BYU team that they've got a bunch of good three-point shooters. Alex Baracel along with Jake Toulson both shoot over 45% from 3. This is a team that has really been prolific with their offense. I do think that there is a little bit of value with some of the underdogs. Gonzaga has gotten to at least the semifinals in the West Coast Conference Tournament in each out of the last 20 years. So don't think that they're going to be coming up short in like that first round game or anything like that. But I could certainly see BYU or St. Mary's perhaps disrupting that apple cart.
Yeah, absolutely. All price dependent here. St. Mary's is going to be a you're going to get more plus money on them than you are on BYU there. But I think BYU a good buying point would be anything over plus 200 because I'm not so sure how big of a dog they're going to be now that Childs is playing with them. A lot of their losses was when Childs was not playing the game at all for them, and then when he came back, then they lost that one game to the Dons, but they just been on an absolute tear lately. So loving BYU and their potential here personally. But St. Mary's, they won it last year, I believe. And I think they definitely, of course, have a shot, and you can't rule them out. Is there any other conferences that you looked at you want to throw out there, or should we move into a game real quick?
Let's throw into some games just because I'm not someone that is really playing a lot of these futures with regards to the conferences. I'm one of those people. I like to take things game by game personally. So it's not one of these things where I'm trying to project what could be because I'm much more concerned about what is actually out there, the games that we can actually bet on.
Absolutely. And that's where you can get into the nitty gritty on how these teams match up with each other. And we'll be doing plenty of that for the next couple weeks because this is March Madness, and we have Greg Peterson from Hoopin with Hoops. And we're just going to talk about a couple quick ones. Michigan State versus Penn State coming up here on Tuesday night. I have Penn State as a 1-point favorite in the total of this game, a 140. It's actually at 142.5 right now. Do you have any thoughts about this? This is an interesting one. Penn State kind of on the downward trajectory. Michigan State's kind of on the upward trajectory. Are you going to make a play on this one?
I think that you have it flipped because I'm seeing Michigan State as between a 1 and 1.5 point favorite, and I'm all aboard Penn State, or I'm all aboard Michigan State in this spot. They are coming off 3 straight wins, of which they got to at least 78 points. They were dominant in that game against Maryland. You've got a guy in Cassius Winston that really did a good job for this team. And can you bet against Tom Izzo in March? He always gets this team playing their best at this time of year. We're seeing it once again. Penn State now has Myron Jones back at the fold. That is big, but he didn't look like himself in that game against Iowa. He had a poor shooting performance in that game. I just don't know how healthy he is. Got to be looking at Michigan State, despite the fact that it's on the road. And it is a revenge spot because last time these two teams played, Penn State went into the Breslin Center and got a win.
Yeah, that's right. And they just got road revenge. Michigan State just got road revenge also against Maryland there. So they have the opportunity to do it again, kind of close everything out, Sparty had that little lull in the middle of the season, but now they're catching some serious heat. One thing I did notice on Bart Torvik is both these teams are kind of trending a little bit lower on their pace than they have been. So, I wonder if maybe the under might not be a bad look. The under is actually 5-0 in the last 5 Penn State games and 10-3-1 in the last 14 Michigan State games. So, it's kind of scary to do it because you see that their pace is a little bit faster than the average, especially Penn State's here. You have any thought on the total real quick?
I'm going over on this total with Michigan State. This is a team that has really cranked it up, 78-plus points in each of their last 3 games. Penn State, they wound up giving up 77 points over the weekend. I know that they've been playing a little bit slower, but with Jones back in the fold as well, I think that that'll crank things up for them as well, so I'm looking over.
Yeah, that's true. Michigan State has been scoring a ton, so you like Michigan State and the over. I looked at Mississippi State versus South Carolina. This is interesting because they're kind of these two bubble teams that Mississippi State might be out. South Carolina's pretty close. They're going to be laying about 2 points here. I wrote the total at 148. Now, I did write these before the spreads come out. I did it last night, and this could be modified a little bit by now. But I think it's an interesting game because these teams, I think, will still be motivated here. And South Carolina, it's kind of weird. They play fast, but their defense is better than their offense. Normally, a fast-paced team, the offense is much better than the defense. It's kind of flip-flop with them. Mississippi State's definitely the better shooting team here, but I didn't really choose a side yet on this game. Still wanted to see what your thoughts are.
Going to be going with Mississippi State because you've got a guy in Reggie Perry that's easily able to give you a double-double. Willie Kotsar on the other end, I just don't know how he's going to be able to hold up with this Mississippi State team. They've been a little bit tough from three-point range because Nick Weatherspoon, ever since he's come back, he hasn't necessarily been a great three-point shooter, but I like what Tyson Carter's bringing to the table, at least 15 points in each of the team's last 3 games. With guys like A.J. Lawson and company, you don't know what you're going to be able to get from them game to game. I do like Jermaine Couisnard at the point guard spot for this South Carolina team, but with that said, I am going to be taking a look at Mississippi State on the money line. I think that they have a lot more to play for with regards to bubble implications. I do think that they're going to be able to get the job done. By the way, when you look at Mississippi State, They are one of the top 5 teams of the over with regards to their conference play. Over 80% of their games in SEC play have went over.
So you also lean to the over then, I would think, on this one.
Yep, we're going to be taking a look at that over.
All right, so the over and Mississippi State as the road dog coming into this matchup here. Another bubble team that's playing, well, 2 more bubble teams playing each other here Wednesday, Minnesota versus Indiana here. Indiana kind of turned it up for a little while here, then they dropped to Minnesota. They are 2-7 in games decided by 6 points or less. I just heard that. That is crazy. They just cannot get it done. They keep choking, but that's why they're so high in the metrics, because they compete with these big teams. They just kind of blow it at the end. You see them do it against Iowa. You see them do it against, I think it was Michigan State. That they just can't close it away. So against Wisconsin just last night. And so, I'm wondering who's going to come out on top of this one. I think I'm going to lean to Indiana here, but what are your thoughts on this one?
We need a line before I can really lean anywhere, because this is a game that is not going to be going down on Tuesday. So I'm not really able to give you a whole heck of a lot until I see a line, because it's all about betting numbers. You're not betting teams in a lot of these spots. So it's one of these things where I wish I could give you something. I don't know what the line is.
Yeah, I have it at -2 as a projected line. So I guess going by that, it would only be a lean for me. I think anything within the 3s for me, I would take the dog, to be honest with you, on this matchup. But I agree. You definitely got to see the line before you make a play. What if Indiana's -2, would that kind of sway you in a direction?
I'd probably be looking at Indiana at home at -2. I mean, this is just a Big Ten in which the home team has been coming through time and time and time again. I don't know how and I don't know why, but this home trend has just not dried up in the Big Ten. So if it would be Indiana laying 2, that's where I would be looking, just because I do think that Trace Jackson Davis is going to be able to do enough to be able to match up with Daniel Oturu, and you just don't know what you're going to get from Minnesota with regards to a 3-point shooting perspective.
Yeah, and Indiana does. They're just like last year. Had a great non-conference. They only they ran through it. They beat Florida State. Then they come to Wisconsin, and first Big Ten game they lost, but they did great. And then all of a sudden they just flopped in the Big Ten. But they still have that shot here. I think if they win a couple of these games to be a bubble team here and actually get in. So we'll see what happens. The last one I just want to bring up: Villanova is playing Seton Hall. We don't have a line yet on this game either, but I guess that. If I was going to project it, I would say Seton Hall would be about a 4-point favorite. Do you have any thoughts on this one, or do you have to wait for a line again?
This is one in which I just cannot give you a whole heck of a lot right now. Not knowing a line, it's going to be tough, because we all remember last time these two teams met up, it was a pretty good battle. So I think that it's going to be another tight game. I would probably look at the home team in this spot, but with that said, just a little bit of a horse apiece situation. You got to think that Villanova is going to shoot a little bit better than they did in their last game against Providence.
Yeah, you definitely hope so. And Seton Hall, they need to hold on to that top 2, that 2 seed. Hopefully, they'll be in the East and get to play like a San Diego State, because that would be a best case scenario for them. It's almost better to be a 2 seed in your area and play against the worst 1 seed, in my opinion, than just to be a 1 seed in some of these situations. So hopefully they can do that, Greg. But I know you're on your 18th hour or something right now, so definitely going to let you get going. But I want to thank you for coming on and talking about some of these tournaments. I'm a huge fan of your show. Have a great time watching these tournaments. I'll be tweeting at you, and have a fantastic rest of your week.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Guys, make sure you follow Greg at @GUnit_81 on Twitter. Have a great time watching the start of these conference tournaments. Enjoy the games and go get some winners.